Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Madam Clerk, do we have any other directors happen to be on the attendee list or anything?
No.
All right, it is 6:31, and I think we're missing one director. Maybe he'll join us here. Let's see if he's on. Okay. Well, we have a packed agenda, so we'll as we start the top of the agenda here, I think that will give him a little bit of time to join us. So it is 6:31. And I want to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Alvarado? I don't see that he is here with us yet. So I will move on to Director Stanley.
Yes.
Director Weiner,
Present.
Vice President Sedith,
Yes, ma'am.
and President Cepeda.
Present.
Okay, and I will check again for Director Alvarado. Don't see him yet. So we'll move on to the next item, which is public comments for items not on the agenda. We did not receive any written comments. However, I do see attendees. And if there are any attendees that would like to speak under public comment for items not on the agenda, if you can please raise your hand. Seeing none raised, we do not have public comments.
And Madam Clerk, I see Director Alvarado has joined us there as well. Wouldn't mind bringing him in. All
Okay.
right. Before we go into closed session, I wanted to, if I may take a point of privilege here, Vice President Sedith, are you ready for the presentation you were going to do?
Yes, sir.
Like directors, it's something just, it's quick comment from, or a quick presentation from Director Sedith. We'll make sure to add it to, there's no voting or anything. It's just, she just has a quick something to say on Black History Month to start us off for the meeting. Go ahead, Director Sedith.
Yes, thank you. Let me see. I want to share this screen.
Oh, freedom.
freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Over me. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my own grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, don't you know? No more weeping. No more weeping over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my own grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom. Oh, freedom. Freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'm going home to my Lord and be free.
Hi, how are you, sir?
Mr. President, this is Lester Townsend. He's 108 years old.
No, he's not. You're lying about your age. You're
The grandson of a slave.
Oh,
Shake his hand
man.
with the president of the United
that's something right
States.
there. So how come you look so good? What's your secret? Huh?
I haven't found it.
What are you eating?
Whatever they bring me. I never thought I'd live to see
Well,
this.
what an honor to see you. I'm just going to try to make sure I look half as good as you when I'm 100. Much less 108.
great.
All right. So nice to see you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you. We have a long way to go. We've come a long way. We have a long way to go. As some of the slides showed you, we're still fighting some of that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Sedith. We figured we'll start something off for our meeting celebrating Black History Month. We're going to try to do that for every celebration we have a proclamation for as well. So thank you. All right. General Counsel Collins, can you please lead us into closed session?
Yes, Mr. President, the board will now convene into closed session pursuant to the Brown Act Government Code Section 54957.6 in connection with labor negotiations as described on the agenda. Now is the time for any public comment on this item, and if there is none, or on these items, and if there is none, then the board will convene into a separate Zoom session and return to this session when the closed session is concluded. Madam Clerk, have we received any comments or requests to speak on the closed session items?
I did not receive any comments or requests to speak. If there are any attendees on the list on here with us that would like to speak on closed session, please unmute yourself or raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, we do not have public comments.
All right, then I would request that the board convene into the separate closed session at this time.
Thank you. Board, you've all received the separate link. If you can please click on that. See you soon. Thank you.
Director Stanley, if you can log out of this meeting and then log into the closed session link that you were provided through email or through your calendar.
Ms. Martinez, believe, who do we have? Oh, there are only three of us. All right, we'll give it another minute here for the other two directors to join us. All right. Can we see Director Alvarado? Somewhere. All right, well, let's get started. He'll join us here in a moment. All right, Ms. Collins, will you mind reading us out from the closed session?
Thank you, Mr. President. The board took no actions in closed session that are required to be reported out under the terms of the Brown Act, and therefore we can proceed into the open session and consent calendar.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. As a reminder to everyone, Vice President Zadeh will be serving as our parliamentarian for tonight's meeting. And then we're going to have our general manager lead us through the rest of the agenda at this time. And before we get into the consent calendar, I just want to thank Director Wiener for his questions on the consent calendar ahead of time, which we're all asked to do to try to move the agenda along and making sure that we get the staff ample time to answer questions so that we have good answers here during the meeting. So thank you, Director Wiener, for that. General Manager, can you please lead us on to the rest of the meeting?
Thank you, President Cepeda. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is our consent calendar. And we have items 2 through 6. Have we received any written comments on the consent calendar?
We did not receive any written comment for the consent calendar items. However, I do see some attendees, and if any of the attendees have public comment for consent agenda items, you can raise your hand. I do see one hand raised. So I will let Speaker Geraldine Gonzalez.
Before you allow her, can you please let in Director Alvarado, please?
I will.
Thank you.
You should be coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I want to remind all the speakers that we do have 3 minutes for public comment, and I did unmute Geraldine Gonzalez. So whenever you're ready, Ms. Gonzalez.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. President Cepeda, the rest of the board directors and staff. I do would like to ask something about on the item number 6. I would like a direction if I can ask the question, or should I just direct the question to the staff?
You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay.
Now, during public comment, we might not always be able to answer it. So we might need to get back to you on any questions if we're able to.
Thank you, Mr. President. You must be wondering why I'm getting, why the union getting involved with this one. In the few years back, in the few negotiations back, at one point we were negotiating for the medical benefit, and there was a change on the medical benefit that affected all the current employees. We were not aware that any changes that happened on the current employees actually affected the retirees. And some of the members that were at that time actually are retirees at this time. And when there was a significant change in the medical benefit on their premium, they actually had contacted some of those members, actually retirees now, actually contacted the local one and reached out to us and see if there was a change on, if there was item that has been negotiated. And I just kind of want to give that brief description why the union is getting involved with this, knowing that they are retired employees. With that, I just have a few questions that were brought out to me by those retirees who reach out to me regarding these issues. And I'm not sure if this can be addressed here, or I can actually, like I said, it can be directed to the staff. One of the questions is we would like to know, like, how many retirees actually got affected. We are aware that we are aware that if you're 65 or older, your Medicare kicks in and your culprits becomes the secondary. So we just want to confirm that the retirees that got affected are actually who are not 65 yet. The other question that they have is, how are the retirees will be notified? We are not sure if the district, most likely the culprits might have, most likely have the current address right now, especially if they actually move out of state. I'm not sure if West County actually do have the current address for those retirees that have been affected and how they will be notified. And the last one is, I'm not really sure about this. Someone sent me this email that if there will be any tax impact if they receive a check from the district for reimbursement, if there will be any tax implication. And I cannot give any more detail on that because I'm not really sure what that means. Thank you for everyone for your time. That's the only thing I have.
Ms. Gonzalez, thank you for bringing that up to our attention. I am not sure that we're able to answer that because those particular questions are not agendized. They're not part of this. Even though it's tied to CalPERS, what's on the actual agenda is a little bit different, but you have a really good question.
Thank you.
Ms. Collins, can you advise, I believe I am correct, right? That we're not able to answer that because it's not agendized?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that question for you.
Okay.
These are really very, very specific questions that we can follow up with the particular retirees with those questions. They're not really pertaining to the overall action that's before the board this evening. Those are really specific individual questions and we can follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Ms. Gonzalez, anything else?
That's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you. Have a great night. Ms. Martinez, anyone else? Or actually back to you, Ms. GM.
If there are any other public comments for under consent, please raise your hands. Seeing no other hands raised, we do not have further comment under consent agenda items.
Mr. President, I move the consent calendar, please.
Second, Director Alvarado. All right, we have a first and a second. Thank you. Do any of the members of the board have any questions or comments on the consent calendar?
Dr. Stanley. Dr. Stanley has her hand up.
Director Stanley?
I would like to know why somebody didn't know this. Talking about the same thing Geraldine was just talking about, why it took union members getting involved to bring this to management. Why didn't we know this when?
Director Stanley, did you want to talk about item number 6?
No, I just want a question answered. I want to know why.
Those are specific, but the general manager just spoke about that. Those are very specific, personal to the members. Those are not general based on what this resolution is about. So is there something specific about what's on the consent calendar, number 6? Or anything else on the consent calendar? That's what's on the floor right now, Director Stanley.
Well, I just feel like I'm not able to ask the question, so I won't. Thank you.
just to clarify that, it's not that you're not able to ask a question. The Brown Act prohibits us from speaking about something that's not agendized. So, and the motion on the floor is about the consent calendar as a whole. So the question has to be about the consent calendar. I know that it's, every board has that. When I attend other meetings as well, everyone always has trouble figuring out what the questions can be about. But the
So
questions
if I have
to
a
be
question,
about the consent
if
calendar.
I have a question, then I would want to pull it, right?
Yes, if you want to question that particular item, then the item had to be pulled before the motion. So right now, the questions that can be made are about the motion at hand. The motion at hand is the consent calendar as a whole.
To be voted on.
So if there's no other questions about the consent calendar as a whole, not about a particular item within the consent calendar, then seeing no other hands, and we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, if you can please take the vote.
Director Alvarado,
Yes.
Director Stanley,
No.
Director Weiner,
Yes.
Vice President Sedith,
Yes, ma'am.
and President Cepeda.
Yeah. Director Alvarado?
Yes.
Thank you. And Director Alvarado, motion passes.
I thought it was first.
You are.
Sorry.
He was. Director Stanley, can you please take your hand down? Your hand's still up. Thank you. Sir, back to you.
Thank you. Madam GM? Next
So the next item on our calendar is the regular calendar. Item 7 is to consider approval of the draft response to the Contra Costa County Civil Grand Jury and the draft board statement that was in the agenda packet. And did we receive any public comments on this, Madam Clerk? Written?
We did not receive any written comment on this. If there are any attendees that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. Seeing none raised, we do not have public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Tonight, we are discussing for the second time the West County Wastewater's response to the grand jury report. At our last meeting, the board engaged in more than an hour in debate and discussion about how to reply. In response to that conversation and the comments made, the general manager prepared a revised statement or response for consideration tonight for the board. But before the general manager provides her report, I would like to make a few remarks, which I've also distributed to the board as a written statement. So give me one moment while I pull that up.
President Cepeda, before you make your statement, I do see a hand up as one of our attendees of the meeting. Would you be okay if we allow them to speak before you make your statement, member of the public?
Sure.
Okay, before I unmute, I just want to remind all public speakers that we do have 3 minutes. And you have been unmuted, so whenever you're ready. Speaker token.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I was first of all unaware of the fact that there would be a closed session. So I felt very left out of the discussion. I assumed that the agenda of today's meeting was a response to the grand jury recommendations. A set of recommendations that had been submitted questions that had been submitted twice and had been responded to twice, and as far as I understand, are being rejected for the second time. And I don't really understand that.
Thank you for your comment. Was that it?
Yes.
Speaker Tolkien?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right. Clerk Martinez, do we have any other attendees that want to speak?
I do not see any other hands raised. So we do not have further public comment.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. All right, let me start with the statements here. Tonight, we're discussing again for the second time West County Wastewater's response to the grand jury. At our last meeting, the board engaged in more than an hour of debate and discussion about how to reply. In response to that conversation and the comments made, the general manager prepared a revised response for our consideration tonight. Before the general manager provides a report, these are my remarks. The origin of this issue was an employee complaint against 2 board members that resulted in an internal investigation in July 2020. In December of that year, the board voted to censor one of the directors, Sherry Stanley, for misconduct and referred the matter to the district attorney's office. This is the same board member who has been censored multiple times for failing to adhere to the conduct requested through previous censors. The matter then went to the grand jury. Rather than focusing on the conduct investigation, the grand jury chose to concentrate on issues pertaining to West County Wastewater's governance and make recommendations that in some cases are not consistent with law or public agencies' best practices. To be sure, the grand jury's statements should not be used as a tactic by certain board members to divert, distract, or deter this board from focusing on the misconduct of individual board members. The censored board members are attempting to divert attention from their own actions by falsely accusing or insinuating and attacking the general manager or taking actions that are properly within her authority and are consistent with public agencies throughout the state. I have the utmost confidence in our general manager, and we should support her continued leadership on critical issues facing this agency. This controversy stems from the misconception by 2 board members that the general manager overstepped her authority by hiring a law firm to support the agency's review of its personnel policies, which was not a specialty for our then general counsel focused in. In doing so, they perceived that the general manager had gone around the board by directly hiring the new firm. In truth, the GM is responsible for running the entire agency and making day-to-day decisions such as this. Over my time on the board, I've repeatedly raised the issue of irregularities in the way our former attorney had advised us on different matters. If you all remembered, he would often use the term, "It's always been done this way." I would later come to realize that our board policy was in conflict with his advice. So we updated the board policies to clarify our objectives. And during that process, realized that we had not done our due diligence with several of our consultants, including our general counsel. We had not gone out to bid in more than 40 years. Much of that to the detriment of our fiscal responsibility and commitment to this community. This caused our former attorney to submit his resignation. As a result, I felt a building animosity toward our GM from board members who seemed to be loyal to the previous attorney, rather than keeping the best interests of the agency in mind. This appeared to lead to increased actions of perceived retaliation towards our general manager from those specific board members. Following the resignation of the previous general counsel's new representation, evaluated by the board through appropriate channels, has found that the agency has been out of compliance in many ways. This agency is now only in compliance with best practices and is working through many of potential liabilities, and not only for the agency, but for directors themselves. Though those board members may not like how this transpired, it needed to be done. Our former counsel's favorite line was, "If I can defend it in court, then it's okay." And that is no way to run an agency. In my view, we are at the vanguard of excellence government, accountability, and agency transformation, bringing a modern approach to public service. West County Wastewater has always adhered to industry standards and will continue to do so. West County Wastewater is deeply invested in ensuring we serve our community in a responsible and transparent manner. I am proud of the actions we have taken as a board. We are a very diverse board and an agency with a very diverse workforce. The number of women in leadership positions has dramatically increased in the last few years, including our general manager, the first woman to lead this organization. And as a reminder, we are celebrating 100 years. Take that into consideration. A situation that even now sometimes leads to discriminatory practices from the board. As we work towards creating an ever more inclusive environment, this is an opportunity for us to move forward with positivity and understanding from our agency and our community. West County Wastewater as an organization is not being accused of any wrongdoing. The investigation, quote unquote, here found no evidence of serious irregularities in our operations or procedures. It is the board that sets policy consistent with California law. The grand jury in its report is sympathetic to the concerns of board members who have sometimes been in the minority on certain votes. However, the report also states, while this frustration is perhaps understandable, it is mostly the function of the political reality of the board. In a democracy, we govern using the majority rule, but providing an opportunity for the minority to be heard and argue positions to try to obtain a majority. That has always been the case at West County Wastewater. And I am proud of our agency's accomplishment in the last few years. And I am embarrassed by the unnecessary controversy this has generated. I have reviewed the updated draft response, and I intend to support this as the final letter West County Wastewater sends back to the grand jury. I will ask the general manager to make a presentation and then allow each board member 2 minutes to make an initial statement. Once each director has spoken, I will allow 1 minute each for any follow-up statements. Fellow directors, while we may not always agree on everything, we are making history with every action we take. I hope these actions will inspire us to look ahead and not behind us, as the future is best viewed through a clear window, not a mirror. Madam General Manager, if you can please proceed.
Thank you, President Cepeda. We do have a PowerPoint presentation we'd like to go through this evening. So I'm going to ask our clerk if she can pull that up. Okay. All right, so this evening, if you can go to the next slide, please. We wanted to go over a few topics. What we realized from the discussion at the last board meeting, which was on January 12th, is that we really didn't provide any context or history to how we arrived at the grand jury investigation. So we realized that that was missing, and it was an important piece we should be sharing with the public. So we wanted to make sure we did that this evening. So tonight we're going to go through the timeline of how we ended up at the investigation. We're going to provide an overview of the grand jury, who they are, what they do. We'll talk a bit about the investigation and then the report. We'll also provide you with some discussion and our recommendations regarding the findings and the recommendations. And then obviously we'll time for questions. This evening presenting with me will be Andrew Clow, who is our Deputy General Manager, and he will be taking the first few slides, and then I will take over from there. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew for the next slide.
Thank you, Lisa. Brenda, are you moving the slides?
I am.
Okay, we can go to the next one. There we go. How did we get here? Okay, we just heard from President Cepeda, but some of this we're going to run through quickly and just answer that question. And in July of 2020, there was an investigation into a complaint of misconduct by 2 board members. Followed later in October, where the board approved reimbursement for legal fees up to $1,000 per board member. And this stemmed from other conversations regarding, the earlier investigation mentioned there in July. In December, the board voted to censure Director Stanley based on those findings of that investigation. Again, in December, the board voted to refer that violation of the fraud policy to the district attorney. The second complaint or initiation of investigation into board members Stanley and Weiner was in July of 2021. And then in September of 2021, the board voted to censure Director Weiner and Director Stanley for a second time for violation of West County wastewater policies in their treatment of the general manager. The censure we talked about briefly is merely a formal public condemnation of an individual or a group member whose conducts run counter to the group's acceptable standards for behavior. That's how we ended up with something that went to the district attorney and eventually ended up with the grand jury report. That's how it started out following this referral. So could you go to the next slide, please? Which does beg the question, what is a grand jury? It's been mentioned a number of times, but what are they? What actually is a grand jury? And a grand jury it's 19 ordinary citizens who don't have any special knowledge necessarily or experience in government. They volunteer for a year providing a valuable public service, and they do this as an independent body under the guidance of a superior court judge. That's who they are. But what is it? What do? They investigate complaints against local government. Those complaints, they can come from citizens, newspaper articles, personal knowledge. They can come from any variety of sources. And then they choose whether they're going to investigate or not. And those investigations that they do are done in secret, which is no real surprise. I mean, that's how investigations are done by a district attorney's office or anything else. You investigate in secret, but then they generate and they report out on that. They report out with their findings and their recommendations. Once those findings and recommendations are out, there is no authority. They possess no authority to compel compliance with those recommendations, but they do publish them. Another way of sort of looking at it, essentially, what the role of a grand jury is to shine a light on local government. You get a complaint, some reason to investigate, take a look. You produce some findings and recommendations based on what you saw. This ordinary body of people volunteering, providing a good public service. So that's the grand jury. Go to the next slide, please. So we have a grand jury report. How did we get here? Well, we ended up at the grand jury because following the referral by the West County Wastewater Board to the district attorney then in June of 2021 contacted the grand jury stating our office has declined to file criminal charges against Director Stanley. However, we do believe that Director Stanley's actions are concerning and are therefore referring the matter to the grand jury for review. So we end up at the grand jury stemming from that initial referral to the district attorney. Also reference on page 1 of the grand jury report about the complaint did not involve allegations of financial impropriety or general mismanagement. On page 4, grand jury did not pursue the question of the conduct of the board members that led to their censure, as there was no request to do so. The grand jury considered that to have been done by the censor and the board itself. But then there's the other reference here to a complaint. A complaint submitted to the grand jury alleged violations of board ethics policy and personal bias. These allegations were vaguely stated and difficult to substantiate. So it's a complaint. There was a complaint about something, about allegations of board ethics policy, et cetera. We don't know exactly. They can't tell us that. But we do know that the grand jury voted to investigate whether there were any irregularities or significant omissions in board operations and procedures. So they chose to take a look for whatever reason, and that's what they did. And if we go to the next slide. The next slide has a brief summary of some of the key takeaways that are in the report. And then, as Lisa mentioned, she'll take it from there and talk about what our responses, recommended responses are to the findings and recommendations. The jury found no evidence of serious irregularities in board operations or procedures. The grand jury found that the probable basis for investigating the complaint lies in the political and personality divisiveness among the board members. The board members in the minority feel they have no power to affect governance and operations. While this frustration is perhaps understandable, it's mostly the function of the political reality of the board. The split has led to a serious breakdown of civility, discord, board meetings, and internal board communication underlines the tension and factionalism among the members. The grand jury recommends the board consider changes to alleviate the concerns of some members have about procedural confusion and financial transparency by implementing some specific written procedures and clarifications. And that's essentially where it ends up, from where it started with the referral to the district attorney with a report by this grand jury. It has some specific written procedures, clarifications, some findings and recommendations, basically. And that's what Lisa's going to talk about now.
Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? So before we get into the specifics on what the grand jury found and their recommendations, I wanted to take a moment to step back and actually talk a little bit about the West County Wastewater's Board of Directors' commitment to governance. This board is committed to practicing good governance and taking the steps to guarantee a high board. And you'll see in a moment that this includes creating the policies that incorporate the best standards, best practices, and what is common in all other public agencies, regularly looking at those policies to ensure that they comply with the law and are current and relevant, and then taking steps to ensure that each director on this board understand and complies with the board, with the policies adopted by the board. Next slide. So in the last 2.5 years in particular, this board has been extremely busy and focused quite a bit on good governance. And to that end, they have taken several steps that I want to just outline here. One of the first steps that this board took was taking a very comprehensive look at the overall board of directors policies and procedures. And you heard President Zepeda talk about the policies being in conflict with the advice of our former council. So the board created an ad hoc committee of 2 board members to take a look and come up with recommendations. Then the recommendations went to one of the standing committees. They took a look at it. And that collective review of the board of directors policies and procedures became the basis for what is now a very comprehensive, updated, and easy to follow policies and procedures. This outlines process. This outlines the roles of each director and how the board is going to function as a whole. Another key component of good governance is the management authority. The management authority is what the board takes a look at and says, these are the delegation of duties that we give to the general manager. These are the things that the general manager is allowed to do when it relates to personnel, operations, spending authority. And the board has looked at this several times in the last few years. And as recently as last February, there was an update to this. The board has looked at every single financial policy that West County has, including, again, a brand new comprehensive updated purchasing policy. And this policy sets the foundation for how we procure goods and services in the organization. So this is a very fundamental purchasing or very fundamental policy for us and sets out our direction around procurement. This board also adopted the first ever debt policy that sets the standards for how this organization enters into any type of debt. The board has also 3 of the major plans that give us our direction, our day-to-day direction, which includes a 5-year strategic plan. They adopted a brand new one in 2020. They looked at our 5-year capital plan, which includes all of our infrastructure needs for the next 5 years. They adopted a new plan in 2019, which also we use to inform our rate increases. And they adopted for the first time ever an action plan that outlines our direction for the steps we're going to take to become an environmentally friendly environmental leader in this industry. The board has also expanded dramatically the transparency of what we do in this organization. We overhauled the website, so we have a completely new website, really focused on the user. We post information there on a regular basis about everything that is going on in the organization. We also launched the Lateral, which is our community newsletter that talks about what's going on in the organization. We have expanded our entry into social media. So you will see regular posts on Facebook, Nextdoor, LinkedIn, and what's not listed here is Twitter. But if you're following Twitter, you will see that West County is frequently messages about what's going on in our community and in our organization. And I also wanted to point out that in 2018, West County was awarded the Certificate of Transparency. And the Certificate of Transparency is awarded by an organization, a nonprofit organization that is focused on looking at and setting the standards for good governance in local government. And West County was able to receive that award based on the work we were doing in 2018. And we have expanded that dramatically. And we took a look at that again, and also another tool, which is called a high performance checklist. And I'm happy to report that we could check off every single requirement because of that. The other thing that the board has done, and as you refer back to the former slide, which I said, is to ensure that every board member understands and is in compliance. This board took very serious steps to ensure that board members who weren't complying with the policies, they took the appropriate actions and the corrective actions to ensure that those board members do come into compliance. Okay, next slide. So we looked at how we were going to develop our response to the grand jury. Just in summary, the grand jury made 8 findings and 4 recommendations. We took a look, we surveyed other local agencies out there. We looked at 19 cities, a combination of cities and other wastewater agencies, to look at what they were doing in their organizations in comparison to what we were doing in West County. We also consulted some of the professional organizations, one I referred to just a few minutes ago, that sets the standards around governance. We looked at our current policies, and what we really found is that West County's policies are actually in compliance and are consistent with what all of the other agencies around us are doing. So as we look to develop our response to the grand jury, what we are recommending the board adopt is: 1, we will implement 1, will partially implement, and 2, we will not implement because they are not in compliance with good governance standards. Next slide. So on this slide, what the findings were. I'm not going to go into the findings here. It's all in the staff report, but I really want to focus here on what the recommendation is and what our proposed response is. And the first recommendation is to adopt procedures which a board member can obtain information about West County operations without the agreement of the general manager. What we said here is we will partially implement this. And what we're suggesting is that by June 30th, West County will update all of our policies, and we will modify what it currently says, which is really just actually putting on paper what is our normal practice. Information requests, which is consistent with all public agencies and good governance, goes to the general manager. We did see 1 or 2 other organizations where it said that you would start with the general manager, but it may be directed to the deputy or a department head when appropriate. That in practice is how it works now. And so we will update our policies to state that in those situations where you start with the general manager, if general manager is not available, then the deputy or department head as appropriate. And we will also provide some additional guidelines on what are the allowable and appropriate communications between our staff and board members. Next slide. The next recommendation is about board members. An individual board member can place an item on the agenda without the general manager approval or board meeting. We will not implement where we're suggesting the board not implement this. This is really in conflict with best practice. And what's really important to remember is that the board of directors only operates as a majority. No individual director can make a decision or act unilaterally, which means they can't put an item on the agenda if it's only them. So they must have a majority. So our practice is already consistent with best practice, what is common in public agencies. And certainly a board member can get something on the agenda if they have the majority of the board in support of that. They also have the option to contact the general manager. This is our practice now. The general manager can either put the item on the agenda or they can bring it to the board, the full board. And at that time, the full board can decide if that's something they want to discuss. Next slide. This item deals with adopting the recommendation is to adopt a written policy on reimbursement of directors' legal fees for both internal investigation and claims brought against a director by an outside party. We recommend the board does implement this, and by June 30th, we would adopt a reimbursement. We would create a policy that outlines when that's appropriate, and as long as it's in conformity with the California Government Code. Next slide, please. And the fourth recommendation is to adopt a procedure that requires the general manager to identify expenditures made under the general manager authority for payments of less than $50,000 per fiscal year. The general manager is delegated the spending authority to spend up to $50,000 per vendor per fiscal year without pre-approval of the board. This is common in public agencies. I don't know the public agency that doesn't do this. However, they all have different dollar amounts of what that threshold is. That's given to the general manager for the effective operation of the organization. So the check register that we provide to the board every month lists every expenditure made by West County. It is a detailed expenditure list that provides the date, the vendor number or the vendor name, what type of expenditure it is, and the dollar amount. And what we found when we looked at other agencies is that our check register is actually more detailed than most. We could find no examples in any of the agencies we looked at or anyone we talked to where expenditures were segregated by authorization. So our current policy and practice is already consistent with other agencies and best practices. And I think it's important to note that this request for the separation of expenses was requested by one of the board members who was censured after a complaint was filed against the director. This has been a longstanding practice in the public in West County to provide this level of check register. And this request was never made prior to that time. So for this reason, we're recommending the board not implement. Next slide. So our recommendation this evening for the board is to approve the draft response, which is the letter to the grand jury, and also approve the draft board statement that was provided in the agenda packet. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Board, do we have any questions on the General Manager's presentation?
Do you want to start with public comment, President Cepeda?
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Miss Brenda?
Thank you. President, we did not receive any written comments. And if there are any attendees that would like to speak under this item, if you can please raise your hands and I'll just give them a moment. Okay, seeing no hands raised, we do not have public comment at this time. I do see a hand raised though, and on one of our directors though.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, then if we have no public comments, then we'll go into director's comments. As a reminder, because we've already spoke through this for over an hour last time, we are going to limit the conversation here to 2 minutes to make an initial statement. And then once each director has spoken, if they wish to speak, we'll allow 1 minute for any follow-up statements. So I do see one hand up there from Director Stanley. Director Stanley?
My private contact information is ssnolan@msn.com. if anyone would like to talk to me further. I will say that the censor investigators did not find any violations of law. Rather, it was 3 directors, the GM and the new attorney, who referred this issue to the grand jury and came up with their own conclusions for their own reasons. I have the opinion that almost all of that what has been said thus far on this issue has been deliberate and willful acts to obscure and deflect from the truth. We are not addressing what the grand jury wrote back. Rather, we're coming up with all kinds of other things. As an elected director, I am extremely concerned about how ratepayer money is being spent. And I have the opinion that our employees are routinely threatened with their jobs or pensions. And this also concerns me. What can the public do? Well, 3 directors are up for re-election this year. Get out and vote. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Director Stanley. The next hand up, I see here Director Wiener. Director Wiener.
You're muted.
Director Wiener, we're starting your time again. Give us 1 second. You're up.
No, it was so brilliant. I'm sorry you all missed it, but I'll start in another second. I have a question on procedure, President Cepeda. Are we going to have a motion on the staff? I mean, our board response to the grand jury report?
Great question, Director Wiener. Yes, we are going to make a motion on approving the response to the grand jury report. This is just questions on general manager's report. Not yet on the grand jury report there. We're going to review that.
And is this the appropriate time to comment on your statement?
Yeah, you can make a comment on that. You're still under 3 minutes, though.
Right, but that does not stall any debate on the actual response to the grand jury report that we're going to vote on subsequent to this, correct?
Yeah, we want to limit any further debate on the issue because we've already debated it for over an hour last time. So,
but we've added so much to the response, probably 20 pages. So I think I need more than 3 minutes, but not more than 5. And I would appreciate the opportunity to speak to the response we're going to vote on once we make a motion. But for now, I hope this is not part of my 3 minutes on that, your limitation on that. I would like to say that in response to the president's statement, in his statement, the president claimed to know my mind and to know my motivations. His characterizations of them are false. Every word he said regarding the reasons for my concerns about the general manager are false. His entire statement is to justify ignoring the grand jury's efforts to focus the board on what is good for the democratic governance of West County wastewater. To illustrate why the grand jury has actual concern, he will be limiting debate. We have a 40-page staff report full of contempt for the grand jury, and we will be given 3 minutes to debate its merits. There is a contempt for democracy and actual good governance in this body.
Thank you, Director Reno. I just want to make sure, was that it?
That is it.
All right, so my computer keeps freezing, so I want to make sure that it didn't freeze and you were still talking, so thank you. All right, directors, with that, I apologize. We are supposed to make a motion here.
Before we do that, I think Director Alvarado, before I speak, Director Alvarado.
Oh, no, I'm good. I think I've heard quite a bit. I'm ready to put this issue to bed. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say just very quickly, President Zepeda, and I want to say this because I feel like I need to say this for the record. We've heard a lot about, being in the minority. We've heard a lot about being stifled, and I want to bring to everyone's attention something. I wanted to 2019 when Director Winter was president and Director Stanley was vice president, and there was several of us who were actually in the minority when I first came onto the board. And I remember not being able to speak because there was someone banging a gavel every time I spoke in Director Winter. And I remember not being able to speak because Director Stanley spoke over me. And being systematically using their positions to silence me or Director Alvarado when they didn't like that we didn't agree with their positions. I remember a good friend, Director McNeil, having to step in to my defense. So I find it disingenuous and offensive to lie blame on board members and try to play the victim, in particular, when these board members are being called for violating policy and violating the code of ethics that they swore when they put their hand up to uphold. We have a legal and fiduciary responsibility to ensure we're not only not upholding bad behavior or spending taxpayer money on board members who continue to act in bad faith, violate ethical or legal principles and responsibilities, or who operate in ways that are contrary to best practices. And there is no way you can continue to spin this. The two of you spoke to the grand jury and told them what you wanted them to hear. And it is very clear that what is written does not address the fact that you violated ethical code, that you committed fraud in response to our policies. And there's no way that you can spin that. Yes, you were upset that we chose to do what was in the best interest of this district. And that included, it wasn't the general manager. And I want everybody on this Zoom to know it was me. It was President Zepeda. It was Director Alvarado. We chose to look at all of the agreements and say 40 years is too long for someone to have a contract that is never renewed, that is never reviewed, that is never put out to bid again. That was us. It was not the general manager. If you're mad at someone, be mad at me. President Zepeda, you can speak for yourself. Director Alvarado, you can speak for yourself. But I will take blame for it because I don't care about blame. I will tell you, it is the people's money. It is the people's budget. And no one deserves to hold a contract for 20, 30, 40 years and never be reviewed. Thank you.
Vice President Saad, your time is up. Thank you. Directors, anyone with that there, can I get a motion?
I move the item.
So that we can discuss the item.
And I second it.
All right.
President Zepeda,
Yes, Director Wiener.
I move to make a substitute motion, also known as an amendment to the motion on the floor. I move the response to the grand jury simply contain approval of all 8 of the findings without comment, and the reply of each of the 4 recommendations be the following. The recommendation has not yet been implemented, but will be implemented in the future, adding a time frame for implementation of July 2022. No additional attachments or verbiage will be sent.
I
Can I get a second?
I do not accept the substitute.
You don't have to. It's in the
No.
rules. It's in the rules.
So we can
that
vote
I
on
may
it.
make an
Hold
amendment.
on. I'm the parliamentarian. We can vote on
Yes,
it. She
I
seconded.
can-
She
all right.
Hold on. She seconded it. Hold on, sir. She seconded. We can vote on it. Miss Brenda,
I'd like to speak on it.
we don't need to speak on it. You already put it on the record and you have a second. It's fine.
I would like to speak for it.
You don't have to. It's already been properly seconded. We don't need discussion. We can vote on it.
No, I don't. I'm talking about before the vote. I would like to have a discussion of what I proposed.
So the president has said we get 1 minute. Do you want to 1 minute debate each, President Zepeda? Is your ruling?
I have a few minutes that it would take to do what I want to do.
But he said 1 minute debate. I'm asking the president, sir.
So I want to make sure, because it's all about the wording. If it's a substitute motion or if it's an amendment, Director Wiener, was this an amendment or was this a substitute motion?
They are one and the same. The substitute motion is just a form of amendment.
So if you're trying to amend the original motion, it has to be accepted.
I'm substituting
Exactly.
it. I'm
Okay.
substituting my motion is a substitute motion for the original motion that was made. So first we discuss the substitute, and then if the substitute fails, we then move to the original and discuss that.
Because
All right.
originally he said amended, so I said I didn't accept. Then he said he substitute. So if he's
They are
substituting
one,
it,
they
I
are
don't
one
have.
and the same.
No, actually, they're not. They are not. So
They are not
if
the
he-
same.
They're not the same.
He's amending you, but now he's substituting, so they're not the
Exactly.
same at all.
Exactly.
My
Because
reading
originally
of
he said
So let's
amending.
go.
my
was it- was it-
Amending,
my
Director
reading
Wiener,
amending, I would have
our
to accept.
rules, my reading
Amending,
of our
I would have to
rules-
accept. If he is a substituting, then it's a different motion.
That's
All right,
correct.
I
So,
made a
think-
substitute motion.
I think Director
And-
Weiner was
Fine.
to make a substitute, so we'll go with the substitute.
It's
You
fine.
got the, Director Stanley, do you still second the substitute motion?
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
we have a
So
first,
how much time do you want, President Zepeda?
all right, let's do 3 minutes because it's a new motion.
3 minutes. Debates total, 3 minutes or each person? Sorry.
Each person.
Okay. Madam Clerk? 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
Does the time begin now?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Okay. I have read the 21 pages of response to the staff proposes to send to the grand jury. I was elected to read a lot of words. I was also elected to read the words and formulate a summary and have an opinion. To summarize the staff recommendations for a board response to the grand jury. The board does not agree the grand jury should have investigated the board for what the grand jury investigated the board for. The board does not agree with the grand jury's failure to investigate what the board asked the grand jury to investigate and will insist the grand jury do what the grand jury wants, what the board wants. The board does not agree with all of the grand jury's findings, especially the ones that support the grand jury's recommendations. The board will implement some of the recommendations and not implement others because the grand jury does not know what they are doing and their investigations were flawed. The board is only doing what everyone else does, so what the grand jury is recommending need not be followed. I can hear my mom asking, would I jump off a cliff if all my friends did? I contacted Gabe Quinto, El Cerrito City Council, Rita Xavier, Mayor of San Pablo, Mike McGill, Central Sand Board, and Anthony Tave of Pinole City Council. All of their bodies require board council's approval to move a member's future agenda item. Some formal and some informal, but none of the members can go to the GM, city manager, for approval of an item for the agenda. The board president, mayor, gives the agenda items to the GM and CM. A small sample, but different than us. The grand jury recommendation too would have us change this practice. I think staff has completely missed the boat with the suggested response to the grand jury report. Because my goal is to represent the interests of the people and to govern in the best manner I can, I support all of the findings and recommendations of the grand jury regarding West County wastewater and ask the board to ignore all advice to the contrary and reject the motion supporting the staff response to the grand jury and accept my substitute amendment.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley, I see your hand up.
Yes, I also support 100% the grand jury's findings and their recommendations. I don't believe that staff responded to any of them. And I find that disturbing. It's a continuing pattern, and I find it very disturbing. I think the grand jury's response was fair. I think it was on point, and that's what we should be talking about. And I think we should reject the original motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stanley. Director Alvarado, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess if we want to go against the, the grand jury because of things that, first of all, were never asked of them, then I would say that's kind of ridiculous, especially if these board members want us to reject the fact that we've been doing things the same way other agencies that are special districts have been doing. I don't get it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. And ha 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 to you, Director Stanley, because I heard you laugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Alvarado. Vice President Senate.
I would just say that one cannot simultaneously claim the successes of this board and condemn this board in the same breath. You cannot simultaneously speak so harsh and negatively about being shut out of decision-making and take credit for the actions resulting from those decisions in the same breath. Especially a director who routinely votes no on every board decision, regardless of whether that no vote makes sense, but then goes on the campaign trail and touts the success and achievements that this board has made over the last 2, 3, almost 4 years. So if we want to talk hypocrisy, if we want to talk about that, then let's talk real. But one cannot do that with a straight face. And the laughter and the disrespect, don't do that. Let's keep some decorum in this place. Thank you, President Zepeda.
Thank you, Vice. Senate, we have our General Manager with her hand up. General Manager.
Thank you. I would like to correct a statement made by Director Stanley, which was factually incorrect and quite dismissive of staff. We have responded to every single finding that the grand jury wrote. It is disrespectful and dismissive of staff who have put months looking at this issue, contemplating this issue, researching this issue, and coming up with what we felt was a very solid response. You may disagree with it, but it is disrespectful and disingenuous of that statement and say that we did not respond. We did. And I also want to correct the record that Director Stanley stated that staff are being threatened with being fired and jeopardizing their pensions, which is factually also incorrect and incredibly dismissive and incredibly offensive to this and this board. So I want to make sure that anybody on this call hears that and is clear about that.
Thank you. Can we close debate now?
Thank you, General Manager. Directors, any other comments about this motion?
Director Alvarado has his hand up, sir.
It's frozen.
Oh.
I just want to call the question.
Yes, that's what I was asking him.
President
But I don't know if
Zepeda.
I'm not sure if President Zepeda has a comment first before we call the question. President Zepeda?
No, let's go ahead and go to the question there. The question is the alternate motion. Thank you. Ms. Martinez, if you can please take the roll.
Director Alvarado,
No.
Director Stanley,
Yes.
Director Weiner,
Yes.
Vice President Sedith,
No.
President Zepeda.
No.
Motion fails.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Then the current motion still stands. We have a motion and a second. Now we're able to have comments about the original motion. Do we have any comments on the original motion? Director Weiner, I see your hand up. And Director Weiner, you're on mute.
Because my goal is to represent the interests of the people and to govern in the best manner I can, I support all of the findings and recommendations of the grand jury regarding West County wastewater and ask the board to ignore all advice to the contrary and reject this motion and the staff response to the grand jury. I would also like to point out that much of what my fellow board members say is indirect and about me and Director Stanley and not about the issue at hand. And when Director Sedith calls for decorum and professionalism just because you can speak well and be undecorous, I think is the word, does not mean that you're following decorum. You should never attack a fellow board member, and you constantly do. Personally, I'm talking about personally. And much of what is said about me is cannot be known. And furthermore, factually, you have no idea who spoke to the grand jury, and you cannot know, and no one can know, because the grand jury does not reveal who makes complaints, as you might imagine. So, I mean, you speak out of two sides of your mouth all the time. It is the most amazing thing. And I would like it to stop, because I'm tired of your attacks on me, your character assassination et al. And I hope you will think about it and do different and do better.
All right, Director Wiener, is that it?
That's it.
All right, thank you. I want to remind the directors to please keep your comments with no names and keep your comments to the agenda at hand. And that goes for everyone. So thank you. Directors, any other comments on the motion on the floor? All right. If I can just say one thing here. This whole procedure, there was a comment made earlier about what this could potentially be costing the agency. And then for everyone in the public to know, this has cost the agency over $200,000 in cost. That is staff time, that is legal time, that is resources, $200,000 due to the censure of just one director. So keep that in mind. What is $200,000? When we talk about the individuals that need help to put the new laterals, that's at least 26 of them. When we talk about, raises or promotions or something else that we can do, or as we're building our infrastructure, that's $200,000 that we no longer have because we had to spend, particularly on Director Stanley's censure. So to quantify that, I wanted to bring that number up. And again, how many other things we could have done with that money. So with that there, Director Reno, do you have any other comments on the motion? You will have 1 minute to speak.
I don't understand why your last comment was even included in the meeting. We are discussing something totally different. It is amazing.
Thank you.
It is amazing.
All right. Then if there's no other comments, then
I
Martinez.
do. I do.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I know it's hard to see my
hand.
hands. I
Yeah.
know. It's okay. I do want to bring context to what you said, because it's not just the money, it's also reputation. And it's hard to put a dollar figure on the reputational cost of the censure of the two directors. And I know there was a comment made about indirect. It's not indirect, it's very direct. It's to Director Stanley and Director Wiener, very direct about what this is. And that's what this is about. The grand jury report, the behavior, the two censors. I'm not being coy and I'm not being indirect, I'm being very direct. The behavior is unacceptable and we cannot continue to go on this way. And we have spent a lot of money on training. We've spent a lot of money, a lot of time. And again, another meeting. And being personally attacked is very funny. We have people laughing in this meeting when we're talking about something that is extremely serious. And for President Zepeda to say that this is $200,000 and to be questioned on why that's being brought up, there's no question. We just said we have a legal and fiduciary responsibility to protect the ratepayers' money. We're talking about doing ratepayer increases with infrastructure to do. We have a responsibility here. And to not take that and to talk about ego and anything else on top of that is totally irresponsible. So no, I will not be quiet. And no, I don't care about anything else except for what we, all of us, said we would do when we took that oath of office. And if that means that some one of you is not happy with me, too bad. We will do what we told the public we will do. And you will do what you told the public you will do. And that's abide by the code of ethics. Thank you so much, President Zepeda. I appreciate the time to talk.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Martinez, can you please take the roll?
Director Alvarado,
Yes.
Director Stanley,
No.
Director Weiner,
No.
Vice President Sedith,
Absolutely.
President Zepeda.
Just to confirm, that was an absolutely yes or absolutely no?
Yes, sir. Absolutely yes.
Thank you. Yes for me.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-2.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Ms. GM.
The next item on the agenda is reports from staff, general manager, and general counsel, and we have no other comments.
Thank you, Ms. General Manager. If there's no comments from the staff, then we go on to next item, Ms. GM.
Yep, the next item I'm sorry, it's back to you, director comments and meeting reports.
All right. Directors, do we have any comments or meeting reports? Director Weiner.
I attended the El Sobrante Chamber of Commerce, the Mayor's Conference, the El Sobrante MAC, and the Infrastructure and Operations and Environment Committees between meetings. And I will be attending the CASA DC Policy Conference at the end of the month. I look forward to that. Finally, I'm saddened that the board has decided to question the grand jury findings and recommendations and ultimately fail to act in the interests of the public and good governance. It is now up to the public to make their interests in good governance at West County Wastewater known at the ballot box in 2022.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley.
I am also saddened at the majority, once again, in their response to the grand jury report. I'm also saddened and concerned for the item that I wanted to talk about before about the retirees and how for 2 years they were paying out of pocket for things and somebody missed it. And who was that somebody and why did they miss it? And that's a question that I'd really like to know because that never should have happened. And thank you to all the people who showed up tonight. Thank you very much. We represent you and you own this district. And we are here to represent you. We're not here for ourselves. And it can be difficult to be in this position. And as you have seen this evening. So thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Stanley. Vice President Sedith.
Yes. So in addition to local meetings at the El Sobrante Chamber and the several other Contra Costa Board of Supervisors meetings, I was able to attend 350 Contra Costa environmental meeting. I will be going there as soon as we hang up. Another one, and as well as a meeting with Senator Padilla last week. and the week before was Senator Feinstein's office. My contribution to there is always regarding infrastructure and environment. Last week, I was able to attend the second session of Water Education for Latino Leaders in Bakersfield, Tehachapi, and in Keene, California, where we were able to get a tour of the Sir Chavez Memorial Center with his son, Paul Chavez. You know the history, but to see it up close and to get the information from the family is one thing. And also Dolores Risha's son and granddaughter had dinner with us and talked to us about that family legacy and seeing water policy and their fight with water and wastewater, making policy and defending against pollution and poison wells was very educational. So our next meeting is tomorrow. It's a virtual meeting. And then we have a Central Valley meeting coming up in Selma, California in another week and a half. And then I have meetings set at the Casa DC and also Aqua Sacramento in 3 weeks. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Sedit. For me, a couple of things. I attended the Richmond City Council meetings. They're going through their district elections. I think I mentioned that as well before. We're going to be having that conversation hopefully soon here. One thing that they just have been talking about, they're under state audit. I mean, if we want to look at agencies that are nearby, not following their own policies, not understanding local laws, they're being audited by the state because of financial mishaps. So unfortunately, our neighbor there is not doing very well, but that's what was on the agenda there. I want to bring up the drop, which, as I mentioned before, I love reading it. I love being able to get all the updates from the drop. And this particular drop, I want to congratulate and thank, if I can bring it up here, our very own Justin Lovell. The Municipal Management Association of Northern California is a 70-year-plus organization that aims to inspire, inform, and connect local government leaders through the support of engaged community. Recently, that organization acknowledged and expressed their gratitude for the substantive contributions that Justin Lovell made to them in 2021. In particular, Justin established a charter for the Credentialed Government Leader Program, CGL, committed that was adopted by both the Municipal Management Association of Northern California, their acronym is MANC, and the MMASC Board of Director. Justin has also helped to formalize the CGL agenda process and develop a work plan for the committee. The leadership and innovation Justin brought to the organization in his role as CGL Program Director help them to continue to provide valuable opportunities to their members. Justin is continuing as CGL Program Director in 2022, and their organization expressed their gratitude for West County Wastewater support and encouragement of leadership development of staff. Congratulations, Justin. Thank you for all the great work you do. As if you didn't have enough to do in our agency, you're taking on even more, and we appreciate your leadership. Thank you so much. And then for anyone driving around our offices here at Hilltop, you're going to see 3 brand new trees. It's going both for the beautification of our agency, but for helping with the carbon emissions, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you all for your hard work. Thank you for that. And if you're one of the attendees and are looking for another position, or maybe you're a member of the public and in need of a job, we are hiring, so please take a look at our website. With that, that is my report. Thank you all. think that then brings us to the end of our meeting. Madam Clerk, can you please take us to that part of the meeting?
Thank you. The last item is adjournment. And our next board meeting will be held on March 2nd, 2022. And the meeting is adjourned at, the time is 9:20 p.m.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.